You hear about them all the time. They're this powerful, mysterious force in the world of finance, usually reserved for the super wealthy. We are, of course, talking about hedge funds. So today, let's try to unpack what's really going on inside this trillion-dollar mystery box.
And I'm not kidding about the scale. First, just try to get your head around this number. The global hedge fund industry manages almost $4.75 trillion. To put that in perspective, that is more than the entire economy of most countries on the planet. This isn't some small corner of the market, it's an absolute behemoth.
But here's the thing, you and I probably can't just decide to invest in one. Why? Because it's a very exclusive club. Hedge funds are typically only open to what are called accredited investors, people with a really high net worth, and big institutions like university endowments or pension funds. That barrier to entry, it's there for a reason.
Right. So, this exclusivity, this secrecy, it naturally leads to the big question. What on earth are they actually doing with all that money? What are the secret strategies that make them so different and, supposedly, so special? Well, let's open up the box and take a look.
Probably the best way to understand what a hedge fund is to start with what it is not. And it is definitely not your average everyday mutual fund. The differences here are, they're fundamental. First up, let's talk about who gets to invest. Like we said, hedge funds are for a pretty small pool of wealthy, what are considered sophisticated investors. Mutual funds, on the other hand, they're built for the rest of us, for the general public, for retail clients.
Now, because they're dealing with different types of investors, the rules are completely different. Mutual funds have to follow a ton of regulations, which forces them to be super transparent about what they own and what their strategy is. Hedge funds? Not so much. They operate with way less oversight and very little required disclosure. And that right there is where that whole black box reputation really comes from. And this freedom from regulation gives hedge funds a much, much bigger toolkit to play with. They can use all sorts of aggressive strategies, like borrowing a ton of money to amplify their bets, that's called leverage, or betting that a stock's price is actually going to fall, which is called short selling. Your average mutual fund is way more restricted in what it's allowed to do. And one last thing, you can't just pull your money out whenever you feel like it. Hedge funds often have what are called lock-up periods, which can mean your money is stuck there for a year, maybe even longer. This lets the managers make longer-term, less liquid investments without having to worry about everyone suddenly asking for their cash back.
So with all this flexibility, all this secrecy, and all these unique rules, what is the end goal? What are they really trying to achieve? Well, it all boils down to the hunt for one single thing, something called alpha.
Okay, so what in the world is alpha? Let's think about it this way. If the entire stock market goes up 10% and your fund also goes up 10%, you didn't really do anything special, right? You just rode the market wave. Alpha is the extra return, the secret sauce that a manager generates through their skill, a return that has nothing to do with what the overall market is doing.
So how do they actually go about chasing this elusive alpha? Well, they use a whole range of really complex strategies. For instance, they might bet on whether or not a big corporate merger is going to happen. Or they could use supercomputers to find and exploit tiny split-second price differences between similar stocks. Or maybe they'll make huge sweeping bets on things like global interest rates or the direction of a currency.
This here is a great illustration of one of the holy grails in this world, a strategy they call portable alpha. The idea is to completely separate the manager's skill from just plain old market luck. You see here, they use financial tools to basically buy the market's return pretty cheaply. That frees up most of the cash to be invested in whatever high-skill pure alpha strategy the manager is best at. What's the end result? You get the normal market return, plus this separate portable chunk of pure skill on top. It's pretty clever.
Okay, so all of these complex, super expensive strategies, they raise the multi-trillion-dollar question. Does any of this actually work? Is that secret sauce really that special? Well, when you look at the data, it's messy, to say the least. This chart shows the alpha that different types of hedge funds generated over several 5-year periods. I mean, just look at the bars. They're all over the place. Some years, they're crushing it, generating real alpha. Other years, it's flat, or they're even losing ground. The one thing you can say for sure is that being consistent is really, really hard. And that gets us to this really crucial term, wide dispersion. All that means is that the gap between the best performing funds and the worst performing funds is absolutely massive. So while one manager might hit a grand slam, another one can strike out so badly it's catastrophic. The potential for both incredible gains and devastating losses is very, very real.
And this brings us to the catch. Because even if you do get into this exclusive club, there's a pretty steep price of admission. And it comes with some very serious risks.
Let's quickly break down the legendary 2 and 20 fee structure. First, the managers charge a management fee. That's usually 1 or 2% of all your money every single year, even if they lose you money. Then, on top of that, they take a performance fee, which is typically 20% of any profits they make. There is one small protection for investors, the high watermark, which just means they can't charge you that performance fee again until they've made back any money they previously lost.
But it's not just the fees. There's another deeper kind of risk. As the analyst Nassim Taleb famously pointed out, a lot of hedge fund strategies are set up to make small, steady profits, but they can be vulnerable to sudden, rare, and absolutely extreme losses from what he calls black swan events.
So what's a black swan? It's something that's basically impossible to predict. An event that nobody sees coming, but that has a massive, game-changing impact. Think about things like the Russian debt default in '98, which blew up a huge hedge fund, or the global financial crisis in 2008, or even the sudden shock of the COVID-19 pandemic. These are the kinds of events that can just totally wipe out funds that are using a lot of leverage.
So, okay, if hedge funds are this risky, expensive, exclusive playground for the mega rich, why should the rest of us even care? Well, it turns out their impact goes way beyond just their direct investors.
And here's the connection to our world. The big money that's pouring into hedge funds these days is increasingly coming from institutions that affect all of us. Pension funds that manage retirement savings for millions of teachers and firefighters, and university endowments that fund research and scholarships. They are now some of the biggest hedge fund investors out there.
So why are they doing it? Well, it comes down to one word: diversification. This chart shows a concept called the efficient frontier, and it illustrates the goal perfectly. Basically, what you want is to be as far up and to the left as possible. That's the sweet spot of getting the highest return for the lowest amount of risk. And as you can see, the portfolios that include hedge funds, at least in theory, get you closer to that sweet spot. The hope is that it makes their entire portfolio stronger and more resilient.
Which really leaves us with the central puzzle, doesn't it? Are these complex, secret, and super expensive funds a genuinely smarter way to manage money? A way to isolate pure skill from luck and diversify risk? Or are they just a much riskier, high-stakes casino that charges an absolute fortune for a seat at the table? The nearly $5 trillion debate on that one is still going strong.